My parents forced us to be the stars of their family channel and made us fake having cancer for donations. This is how it turned out. Ever since my younger sister and I were old enough to clothe ourselves, my parents expected us to dedicate every ounce of free time into helping the family YouTube channel. At first, it was just staying up till 2 a.m. to edit and post, but then it got worse. Mom started wailing on us off camera to get the perfect take of us crying. Dad began denying us food until we recorded videos for our solo channels. Our teachers questioned why we looked so tired and were getting skinnier, and that's when my parents lied to them that we were chronically ill. The amount of special attention, kindness, and even money that they received because of this one lie planted a seed in their head. Because not even a month later, we were packing up and moving across the country. Mom said it was for a simple change of scenery, but then, on the first night, she taped me to a chair. She pulled out a razor and shaved my head completely bald. I screamed and cried, but she just kept buzzing. The next morning, she made me sit in front of the camera and announce on our channel that I had melanoma. I tried to tell her no at first, that I wasn't comfortable lying, but she just took out her belt and started using it until I agreed. I filmed the video in genuine tears. I think that's why Mom liked it so much. The GoFundMe went live that afternoon, and unfortunately, that was just the start. By nighttime, I was already forced to practice this shuffle walk, where I'd hold onto walls like I was weak from chemo. I wasn't given a full portion of dinner either. Dad said I needed to become skinnier so it would look more convincing. The very next morning, Mom spent an hour putting makeup onto me to create dark circles and make my skin look pale and sick. I remember my sister standing in the corner, shaking, too afraid to speak in case they forced her to. And 1 month later, they did. They announced my 6-year-old sister had muscular dystrophy. They made me and my sister record the video, just us two, and had us cry on each other's shoulders. My parents specifically chose that disease because they said its progression would be easy to see over time. My sister just needed to get noticeably weaker and more frail, and so they instantly bought her leg braces she didn't need and made her wear them constantly. Even screwed them into her leg at night while she slept, piercing the screw into her calf. She'd cry and scream in pain all night, begging my parents to take it off, but they just put in their noise-canceling earphones and drift to sleep on their duck-feathered king-sized mattress. Before I even knew it, the brace had done so much damage my sister stopped being able to actually walk properly. She'd limp everywhere and wince in pain, and Mom and Dad loved it. Now their videos of her struggling to walk wouldn't even have to be fake. I remember they even took to the school when it started becoming really profitable. They forced my sister and me to the principal's office alone, coaching us to request surprise fundraisers, kept secret from our parents, specifically to help with money. I remember the night that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I came downstairs to get some alcohol wipes to clean my sister's leg wound when I found Mom and Dad in the kitchen talking about the day's earnings. Mom had a spreadsheet open, and they were tracking which symptoms generated the most donations. I overheard them planning to announce that my cancer had spread to my brain and talking about wounding my sister's skin to give her fake surgery scars. That's when I had to stand up to them. The next week, I asked to see the school nurse, something I'd never dared to do before. When I came into her office, she instantly started accommodating me, the potentially terminal cancer kid, until I stopped her. I pulled out the fake medical documents I'd grabbed before leaving for school this morning. They had obvious Photoshop marks on them. Not only that, I took out my phone and showed her the makeup in my bag that I used during lunch to reapply my cancer look. The nurse's mouth dropped more and more. Of course, I told her everything, from the cancer to my sister's leg brace. She promised to handle it carefully and started the reporting process. She then broke protocol and even gave me a hug, promising neither my sister nor I would ever have to live through anything like that ever again. I went back to class, shaking, because I knew what would happen if my parents found out. Well, within 2 hours they showed up to school. Mom was crying these perfect tears, while Dad wore his best grief face. They brought thick folders full of medical records dating back years. They had fake oncologist letters and highly skilled photoshopped test results showing cancer markers. Dad pulled out his iPad with some actor I'd never seen before pretending to be a doctor on a video call with a fake office in the background. They explained to the principal that medical trauma denial was common in pediatric cancer patients. Mom said the only reason I'd brought makeup to school was I was in denial about my illness and trying to look healthy. I saw in real time the nurse's face shift as she started doubting herself. The documents looked real and the doctor seemed legitimate. The principal suggested waiting for a full investigation. They sent me home that day with my parents. That evening, my dad called me to the kitchen table after sending my sister to her room. His face was grave as he set down a prescription bag. 2 a day, every day, starting now. He then took a med and started shoving it in my mouth. I tried to spit it out, but his fingers held my jaw shut. The bitter taste spread across my tongue as he tilted my head back, forcing me to swallow. My throat burned as the med went down. Dad watched me for several minutes, checking under my tongue and between my cheeks. When he was satisfied, he pushed the prescription bottle across the table. The label had my name on it, prescribed by Dr. Nathanson, Mom's therapist friend who'd been treating her for years. I recognized the medication name from Mom's old bottles in the bathroom cabinet. Psychiatric substances, the kind that made her stare at walls for hours when she first started taking them. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep before creeping to the bathroom. I shoved my fingers down my throat over the toilet, trying to bring up the med. Nothing came except bile. Dad appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. He didn't say anything, just stood there watching as I wiped my mouth with shaking hands. When I tried to push past him, he blocked the door. We stayed like that for 20 minutes before he finally stepped aside. The next morning, Mom gathered us in the living room. She had her camera set up on the tripod, the ring light casting harsh shadows on our faces. My sister sat beside me, her leg brace digging into her calf. I could see fresh blood seeping through her sock. Mom cleared her throat and pressed record. She announced to our followers that we were taking a break from content creation to focus on family health. Her voice cracked perfectly on cue. Dad stood behind the camera, watching my throat as Mom handed me my morning med. I tried to palm it, sliding it under my tongue when I pretended to swallow, but Mom was ready. She'd learned from her own institutionalization. Her fingers probed my mouth, checking every hiding spot, under the tongue, in the cheeks, between fingers, behind molars. The med dissolved on my tongue, coating my mouth with its chemical taste. Within an hour, my head felt heavy. My hands started shaking when I tried to write in my journal. The words came out crooked and wrong. My phone buzzed with an email from the school counselor asking about a follow-up visit. Before I could respond, Dad snatched it from my hands. He typed back using my account, attaching a doctor's note for home treatment, signed by Dr. Nathanson. That afternoon, I heard drilling sounds from my sister's room. Her whimpers carried through the thin walls. Mom appeared in my doorway holding out my afternoon dose. I looked toward my sister's room, then back at the pills in her palm. The choice was clear: take the medication or watch them restart her physical therapy with the power tools. I dry swallowed both pills without protest. Mom smiled and patted my bald head. The fog descended quickly this time. My handwriting became so shaky I couldn't text for help, even if I'd had my phone. Letters swam on the page when I tried to read. My sister limped past my door, fresh bandages wrapped around her leg. 3 problems hit us at once that week. Grandma called, insisting on visiting for my birthday. Dad's boss demanded he return to the office after months of family medical leave. And my sister's teacher had started asking questions about her worsening limp. Mom went into crisis mode. She coached my sister and me on what to say, how to act, what symptoms to display. Before Grandma arrived, I helped my sister cover her bruises with concealer. She whispered something that made my drugged mind reel. Like we do for videos, but backwards. She was right. Instead of creating fake injuries, we were hiding real ones. Grandma arrived with a chocolate cake and worried eyes. She kept staring at my shaking hands during dinner. When my medication-induced tremor made me drop my fork, she reached across the table. "Are you sick too?" she asked gently. Mom and Dad exchanged calculating looks across the table. I saw them planning their next lie in real time. Over the next few days, Mom had a breakdown while checking our bank balance. The channel monetization had stopped completely without new content. GoFundMe had flagged our account for review. She slammed her laptop shut and stormed upstairs. That night, my sister crawled into my bed. Her leg brace caught on the sheets, making her whimper. She pressed her face against my shoulder. "Maybe if we were better actors," she whispered, "they wouldn't have to hurt us for real." I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that none of this was about our acting, but the medication made my thoughts move like molasses. By the time I formed the words, she'd already fallen asleep. The next evening, I passed Dad's office and glimpsed his computer screen. He was researching residential treatment facilities for defiant teens. The browser tabs showed facilities in different states, places with names like Wilderness Therapy and Behavioral Modification Ranch. My blood ran cold even through the medication haze. I knew what those places were. Kids who went there came back different, or didn't come back at all. At dinner, Grandma visited again. This time, she brought Aunt Vicky, who needed Mom's signature for Grandpa's DNR order. Apparently, Mom had medical power of attorney from some old family arrangement. While they discussed paperwork, Grandma kept watching my trembling hands. Dad must have noticed her concern. He launched into a story about how I'd been self-harming for attention ever since the channel started struggling. He rolled up my sleeve to show an old scar from a bike accident years ago, presenting it as proof of my destructive behavior. Grandma's face crumpled. She believed him. That night, our parents made a drastic decision. They deleted our family YouTube channel entirely. Every video, every playlist, every trace of our online presence vanished overnight. They used special software to clear cached versions and remove tagged photos across all platforms. Too painful with our children's conditions worsening, Mom explained to concerned relatives who called. My virtual school attendance had been dropping due to the medication's sedating effects. I'd sleep through morning classes, unable to fight the drowsiness. My parents used this as evidence to begin formal withdrawal procedures, citing medical needs. Within days, they controlled everything. Devices confiscated, bedroom door removed from its hinges, bathroom trips supervised. "For your safety" became the family motto, repeated whenever we protested. I stumbled on the stairs one afternoon, my medication-dulled reflexes too slow to catch myself. Dad caught me just before I hit the bottom. To Grandma, who was visiting again, it looked like a caring father protecting his sick child. To me, his grip felt like a prison guard's. My phone, which had been been confiscated weeks ago, apparently still received messages. Mom showed me a text from my best friend asking why I'd disappeared from social media. She'd already changed all my passwords. My digital life was being erased as thoroughly as our YouTube channel. The neighbors stopped asking about us. Mom's story of medical privacy and difficult treatments created the perfect shield. Sympathy cards arrived daily. Casseroles appeared on our doorstep. Everyone wanted to help the family going through such hardship. One morning, I tried to flush my pills down the toilet. Mom caught me and switched tactics. She started adding liquid medication to my food instead. The bitter taste contaminated everything I ate. There was no avoiding it. Uncle Jonathan visited that week, mentioning his daughter needed Mom's referral for a specialist. Somehow, Mom's fake medical connections had become a real network over the years. Doctors who didn't ask questions, pharmacists who filled suspicious prescriptions, a whole system built on lies. I realized proving abuse would require outside contact, but I couldn't leave the house or communicate with anyone. I spent hours watching the mailman through my window like a prisoner counting days. The principal called about a welfare check after my extended absence. My parents smoothly redirected, scheduling a supervised homeschool evaluation with their chosen assessor instead. Another friend of Mom's who wouldn't ask hard questions. By the end of that month, we all understood the situation. This was a siege. My parents needed us compliant until they could establish new income. I needed to survive until someone noticed what was really happening. But with every passing day, the medication made thinking harder. The fog grew thicker, and my sister's limp grew worse. Mom befriended my former teacher during a parent support group meeting at the community center. She brought home my essay about feeling trapped, pulling it from her purse with theatrical concern. The paper had red marks where the teacher had underlined phrases about isolation and fear. Mom filed it in her growing binder of evidence. The same events looked different through their lens. What I experienced as imprisonment, they documented as necessary medical supervision. Dad kept detailed logs in a leather journal, recording every stumble, every tremor, every moment I struggled with the medication's effects. His neat handwriting transformed my suffering into clinical observations. While organizing the attic for storage space, I discovered my old journal from 2 years ago. The entries about wanting to be someone special, about dreaming of fame through our YouTube channel, became ammunition. Mom photocopied pages where I'd written about wanting attention, about feeling invisible before the channel started. She highlighted passages and added sticky notes with psychiatric terminology. My sister's mental state deteriorated faster than her physical condition. After months of wearing the leg braces and enduring their treatments, she started believing the lies. On her 7th birthday, she asked for a wheelchair, not because she needed one, but because she thought she was supposed to need one. The request delighted our parents. They staged family photos to send to relatives for the holidays. Mom positioned us carefully on the couch, adjusting our postures to look appropriately ill. My sister leaned heavily on her crutches, while I sat with the blank stare the medication induced. Mom set the timer and rushed to join us, her face instantly shifting to concerned mother mode. We sat frozen like dolls, smiling through the chemical haze while the camera clicked. A teacher's report triggered a CPS visit. Mom and Dad spent 3 days preparing us, drilling scripts into our foggy minds. They explained the consequences of deviation with my sister's leg brace tightened an extra notch and my medication dose temporarily increased. The message was clear. During my drowsiest moments after the morning dose, I learned to palm pills. The medication made me sleep deeply for about an hour after taking it. I used this window to spit out the afternoon dose when Mom's supervision briefly lapsed. Slowly, carefully, I built a small stash hidden in the lining of my mattress. While my parents grocery shopped, leaving us locked in our rooms, I searched their bedroom. Their closet held boxes of medical supplies, prescription pads with Dr. Nathanson's signature stamp, and detailed logs dating back years. The most terrifying discovery was a folder labeled Long-Term Care Options. Inside were brochures for residential facilities, pricing sheets, and correspondence with admissions counselors. The family therapist they hired never actually met with us. Dr. Nathanson's colleague only consulted with Mom and Dad, documenting whatever narrative they provided. I watched through the window as the therapist left after each session, never having climbed the stairs to our rooms. I found an old iPod in a drawer and tried recording their conversations. The device still worked, barely. I pressed it against the floor during one of their planning sessions, capturing muffled audio of their discussions about my deteriorating mental state. Dad found it during a room check. He destroyed it in front of me, then added the incident to his log as evidence of paranoid behavior. The CPS worker arrived on a Tuesday morning. I performed the role of my life, agreeing with my parents' version of events, while my sister sat silent beside me. Every truthful word risked consequences for her. The worker took notes, asked gentle questions, and seemed satisfied with our rehearsed responses. She left after an hour, case closed. Mom informed us afterward that the school nurse who'd tried to help had been told her services were no longer required. Our family had a private medical team now, she explained. No more mandated reporters, no more outside oversight. That night, they installed a baby monitor in my room. The red light blinked constantly from its mount in the corner. Motion sensors lined the doorway. Dad reviewed the footage each morning on his tablet, fast-forwarding through hours of me lying still, afraid to move. Mom made an offer during my afternoon medication administration. She promised that if I took my medicine without fighting for 1 month, they'd consider letting me return to regular school. The calculation was transparent. 1 month would take us past the evaluation date she'd already scheduled with Dr. Nathanson. My refusal triggered immediate consequences, not for me, but for my sister. They conducted a physical therapy session in the room next door, her muffled screams barely audible over the television volume Dad had raised to mask the sound. I swallowed the pills without further protest. While returning a box to the attic, I discovered an old letter hidden between stored Christmas decorations. It detailed a CPS investigation from 2 years ago, before the YouTube channel started. Someone had reported concerns about our welfare. The case was closed due to lack of evidence. We'd been trying to signal for help even then. Looking back, I realized both of us had been attempting to communicate our situation for years. My sister through disturbing drawings at school that teachers dismissed as childhood imagination. Me through essays about family pressure that got interpreted as typical teenage angst. No one had connected the dots. Mom's medical fraud, I learned from overheard conversations, had started differently. She'd been trying to get Dad to acknowledge and treat his mental health issues. When he refused, she began medicating him secretly. The control it gave her became addictive. It spiraled into a shared delusion where they convinced each other that controlling us medically was an act of love. Grandma faced an impossible choice during her next visit. She saw the symptoms, noticed our deterioration, but challenging my parents meant risking her access to us entirely. Mom reminded her how she'd already lost one family member to false accusations years ago. The threat was subtle but effective. Grandma left that day with troubled eyes. She hugged us longer than usual, studying our faces as if memorizing them. I saw doubt creeping into her expression, the first crack in the family's unified front. I began playing along perfectly after that visit, taking medication without protest, acting appropriately sick, agreeing with every version of reality my parents presented. The performance exhausted me, but it served a purpose. They started to relax their vigilance. During a grocery trip where they brought us along to maintain appearances, I palmed a piece of paper with a help message scrawled in shaky handwriting. Security cameras covered every angle of the store. When I tried to slip it to the cashier, Dad's hand on my shoulder made me drop it. They reviewed all the footage in the car afterward. On one of their rare simultaneous work shifts, I used my sister's toy camera to photograph evidence. The medication bottles lined up on the counter, the logs Dad kept, the medical supplies that shouldn't exist in a normal home. The camera's memory card was tiny, easy to hide. Mom's estranged brother appeared unexpectedly, claiming he wanted to help with our medical expenses. His real interest became clear when he asked about our grandmother's estate. He wanted to know if we'd been written into her will, if there was money he could access by becoming our guardian. The visit turned into a screaming match when Mom realized his intentions. Fighting battles on multiple fronts meant I missed warning signs about my sister's condition. While I focused on gathering evidence and planning escape, her leg injury had become infected. The fever spike was real this time, requiring actual antibiotics. The irony of them having to seek legitimate medical care wasn't lost on anyone. Our college funds disappeared first, then our savings bonds gifted by grandparents over the years. Mom and Dad claimed the money went to medical expenses, but I knew they were covering the income lost from the deleted channel. Their financial desperation added a new urgency to finding alternative income through disability claims. Dinner became a battlefield. Dad threw his plate against the wall when I questioned the necessity of a new medication. Mom screamed about the sacrifices they'd made, the opportunities they'd given up for us. We huddled together under the table as ceramic shards scattered across the floor. Dad's job finally threatened termination after months of excessive absences. He'd used up family medical leave, sick days, and the company's patience. He blamed us during the resulting meltdown, itemizing everything we'd cost him, the promotion he'd missed, the retirement contributions he'd stopped, the life he'd abandoned to provide constant care for his sick children. They moved us to a back bedroom, claiming we needed quiet for recovery. The windows were painted black. The doorknob was reversed to lock from the outside. Every modification was documented as a safety measure in their ever-growing medical logs. Aunt Vicky visited to check on us after Grandma expressed concerns. I begged for help while Mom was in the bathroom, whispering urgently about the medications, the locks, the abuse. Vicky's response crushed my remaining hope. She patted my hand and assured me my parents were doing their best with difficult children. The family had closed ranks. I wrote a desperate letter to my former teacher and hid it in my pillowcase, planning to somehow get it delivered. Mom found it during a room search. She contacted the teacher to explain that I was experiencing delusions as a medication side effect. The teacher stopped asking questions after that conversation. My last friend's family was forbidden from contacting us after my parents claimed I'd made disturbing threats during a phone call that never happened. The isolation was complete. Every potential lifeline had been severed. Maintaining the performance of a sick child while documenting abuse stretched my sanity to its breaking point. The medication caused real symptoms now: tremors, confusion, difficulty concentrating. I couldn't distinguish between substance-induced effects and genuine panic. The thought crept in during dark moments that maybe I really was sick. My parents documented my deterioration with photos and videos. They captured my medication-induced stumbles, my trembling hands, my blank stares. Each image was carefully labeled and filed. They were building a case for institutional commitment. Looking through my sister's old drawings, I realized I'd missed countless pleas for help while focused on my own survival. She'd drawn pictures of children in cages, families with missing faces, houses with no doors. Every image was a coded message I'd been too overwhelmed to decipher. Mom scheduled an evaluation with Dr. Nathanson for 2 weeks out. He'd already agreed to recommend residential treatment based solely on my parents' reports. The appointment was a formality, the outcome predetermined. Dad genuinely believed he was protecting our family from the shame of mental illness. In his mind, controlling everything prevented us from becoming like his brother who'd died by sewer slide, or his mother who'd spent years in psychiatric facilities. He saw our resistance as symptoms of the very illness he was trying to prevent. Mom's notebook revealed the generational pattern. Her own mother had done the same thing, using medical control to manage family members deemed difficult. The cycle of trauma disguised as care stretched back decades. I faced an impossible choice. To save my sister, I needed to use her as a messenger to hide evidence outside the house, but doing so meant traumatizing her further, making her complicit in deception. She looked at me with hurt eyes when I asked her to hide the memory card in her shoe during her next doctor's visit, accusing me of acting like them. The protective instincts that had driven me to gather evidence warred with the reality of what I was asking of her. Every action to save us required betraying her trust first. The moral complexity was unbearable. Dad found my hidden med stash during a mattress inspection. The small collection of half-dissolved tablets represented weeks of careful deception. He didn't rage or yell. He simply added the discovery to his log and increased the liquid medication in my food. Trust between us was broken permanently. A small victory came when Dad questioned Mom's dosing decisions during my evening medication. He suggested the doses might be too high, that my symptoms were worsening rather than improving. Mom shut down his concerns immediately, but I'd seen the first crack in their unified front. Their new narrative painted me as dangerously mentally ill, someone who'd been manipulating everyone, including them. They spoke of my condition with practiced sorrow, perfecting their roles as devoted parents pushed to their limits by a troubled child. Everything hinged on the upcoming psychiatric evaluation, my parents' chosen doctor against my drugged performance. The outcome would determine whether I'd disappear into a residential facility or remain in their care. Neither option offered hope. I discovered printed emails between Dad and various transport companies. They specialized in removing unwilling teenagers to wilderness therapy programs. The correspondence discussed my non-existent violent episodes, my fabricated threats, my imaginary escape attempts. They were preparing for my removal. Insurance documents revealed the full scope of their deception. They'd claimed I had severe conduct disorder with psychotic features. My sister allegedly suffered from conversion disorder, her physical symptoms blamed on psychological trauma I'd supposedly inflicted. The lies had metastasized through every system meant to protect us. The realization hit me during a particularly lucid moment between doses. My parents believed their own lies now. The shared psychosis was complete. When Mom cried, asking why I wouldn't just get better, her tears were real. In her fractured reality, she was a devoted mother watching her child deteriorate despite her best efforts. I committed to faking dramatic improvement to buy time. The performance required careful calibration. Too much progress would seem suspicious. Too little would accelerate their plans for residential treatment. I practiced in the mirror, perfecting the subtle signs of medication compliance and mental stability. During the next morning's medication administration, I triggered my gag reflex and vomited. Mom assumed it was a side effect and worried about absorption rates. She gave me a double dose to compensate, carefully logging the incident in her medical journal. While supervised in the bathroom, I used my fingernail to scratch a help message inside the medicine cabinet. The words were small, desperate, carved into the wood where future residents might find them. It was a futile gesture, but I needed to leave some trace of truth behind. My sister's infected leg forced an emergency room visit that couldn't be avoided. Real medical professionals examined her for the first time in months. The nurse noticed behavioral indicators of abuse, the way my sister flinched from touch, how she looked to our parents before answering questions. Notes were made, concerns documented in systems my parents couldn't access. Mom's estranged sister, a nurse herself, drove by our house repeatedly. She'd seen photos of the medication bottles through the window and recognized the pharmaceutical cocktail. But without proof of harm, without access to us, she could only document her concerns and wait. She texted Mom lists of symptoms to watch for, knowing what was happening but unable to prove it. The transport team was scheduled for 3 days after the psychiatric evaluation. My parents had learned from other families in their network that surprise removal worked best. Take the child during school hours when they couldn't barricade themselves in their room. I'd have no warning, no chance to resist. Research into these programs revealed the truth. Kids who went to wilderness therapy rarely returned unchanged. The isolation, the physical challenges, the psychological pressure. It was conversion therapy by another name, designed to break difficult children and rebuild them as compliant adults. My parents saw it as necessary treatment. I saw it as a final prison. The transport team arrived 3 days later during what should have been school hours. I watched from my bedroom window as two burly men in matching polo shirts stepped out of an unmarked van. They carried restraints and paperwork, moving with practiced efficiency toward our front door. Mom greeted them with her concerned mother act, while Dad reviewed the psychiatric hold documentation one final time. I heard their footsteps on the stairs, heavy and deliberate. My sister pressed herself against the wall in the hallway, watching with wide eyes as they approached my door. The moment they entered, I fought, not because I thought I could win, but because I needed someone to witness what was happening. I knocked over Mom's filing cabinet in the struggle, sending years of fabricated medical records cascading across the floor. The psychiatric hold paperwork landed next to contradictory insurance claims, creating a paper trail of lies visible to anyone who looked. Through the window, I saw our mailman pause on his route. He watched as the transport team dragged me toward the van, my resistance visible from the street. His hand moved to his phone, dialing as he witnessed the scene unfold. The police arrived before the van could leave. Two officers approached cautiously, responding to the mailman's report of a violent disturbance. They found me restrained in the back, while my parents presented their documentation. The officers examined the psychiatric hold paperwork, then looked at the scattered documents still visible through our open front door. One officer noticed inconsistencies immediately. The dates on the psychiatric evaluation didn't match the insurance claims. The signature on the transport authorization looked different from other documents bearing the same doctor's name. They requested additional verification, while I sat silent in the van, knowing any words would be dismissed as symptoms of my supposed illness. Dad's composure cracked under questioning. When pressed about the conflicting documentation, he broke down completely. Through tears, he admitted to the officers that he just wanted to fix us like Mom had fixed him. The confession spilled out in fragments. His own history of being medicated without consent, Mom's control disguised as care, their shared belief that managing us medically would prevent future tragedy. The officers called for backup and emergency services. Paramedics arrived to evaluate both my sister and me, while our parents were separated for individual questioning. For the first time in months, medical professionals examined us without our parents' narrative controlling the assessment. The hospital social worker documented everything with clinical precision. My blood work showed toxic levels of psychiatric medications. My sister's leg displayed clear signs of prolonged restraint injury and infection. The malnutrition was evident in our weight loss and vitamin deficiencies. Each finding contradicted our parents' carefully crafted medical narrative. Physical evidence mounted quickly. The hospital's substance screening identified multiple psychiatric medications in my system at doses inappropriate for my age and weight. X-rays of my sister's leg revealed bone damage from the modified braces. Our medical records from before the move showed no history of the conditions our parents claimed we had. The emergency room nurse recognized behavioral indicators she'd been trained to identify. The way we both flinched from sudden movements. How my sister looked to me before answering questions. My inability to maintain eye contact with authority figures. She documented each observation in official records our parents couldn't access or alter. Child Protective Services arrived with emergency removal orders. A judge granted temporary custody to the state based on medical evidence of abuse. Our parents were detained for questioning while investigators began unraveling years of fraud. The GoFundMe records alone revealed thousands in donations obtained through false pretenses. Bank records exposed the full scope of their deception. Deposits from fundraisers traced directly to personal expenses, not medical care. The deleted YouTube channel's earnings had supported our family for years. When that income stream ended, they'd escalated their control to maintain the lifestyle built on lies. Investigators discovered our parents had learned techniques from online communities dedicated to troubled teen management. Forums where parents shared methods for obtaining psychiatric diagnoses, recommended compliant doctors, and discussed transport companies. The network was extensive, but operated in legal gray areas. My sister underwent emergency surgery to repair damage to her leg. The surgeon documented that prolonged use of improperly modified braces had caused permanent harm. She would need months of physical therapy and might always walk with a slight limp. The evidence was undeniable and photographed for court records. During my medical evaluation, I struggled to differentiate between substance-induced symptoms and genuine trauma responses. The psychiatric team began supervised withdrawal from medications I'd never needed. Each day brought slightly more clarity, though the process was slow and sometimes painful. Our grandmother received emergency custody after extensive background checks. The court recognized her as our most stable relative despite her age. She arrived at the hospital with tears streaming down her face, apologizing for not acting on her suspicions sooner. We moved into her small apartment under strict supervision from social services. The criminal case against our parents proceeded quickly, given the extensive documentation they'd created themselves. Prosecutors charged them with medical child abuse, fraud, and false imprisonment. Their own detailed logs became evidence against them. Every Every photo they'd taken to document our deterioration showed the progression of actual abuse. Mom's psychiatric evaluation revealed she genuinely couldn't distinguish between care and control anymore. Years of medicating family members had warped her perception of love and protection. She insisted during interviews that everything she'd done was to help us, unable to recognize the harm she'd caused. Dad accepted a plea deal first, testifying about their methods in exchange for a reduced sentence. He detailed how they'd researched symptoms online, practiced their Concerned Parent Act, and built a network of compliant medical professionals. His testimony helped prosecutors understand the full scope of their crimes. Local homeschool advocacy groups discovered our case had connections to similar situations. Several families in their network showed comparable patterns of medical control and isolation. Our case became part of a larger investigation into underground networks promoting medical child abuse as behavior modification. The trial concluded with both parents receiving prison sentences of 5 to 7 years. The judge considered the systematic nature of their abuse, the financial fraud, and the permanent physical harm to my sister. They were prohibited from any unsupervised contact with minors after release. 1 year later, recovery continued slowly. I attended intensive therapy to process the trauma and relearn how to trust my own perceptions. My sister worked with physical therapists to regain mobility, though her leg would never fully heal. Grandmother struggled with her own guilt while learning to provide the stable home we'd never had. The YouTube channel remained permanently deleted, our public life erased as if it had never existed. No archived videos surfaced, no digital footprint remained. The family that had lived their lives online vanished completely, leaving only court records and medical files as evidence of what we'd endured.